Welcome back, friends, to the Get a Grip on Lighting Conversation series. That's right, Greg and I wanted to produce episodes that we would want to listen to, and we got our good friend back, Henrik Clausen, who is the head of research at Fagerholt Global, and he founded the Fagerholt Lighting Academy, and he is interviewing today Mark Ridler, who is an award-winning international designer who leads the lighting profession from across the BDP. Now, I don't know what that stands for right off the top of my head now, but you're probably going to find out in the podcast. 35 years experience and is a fellow of the Royal Society of Arts. Mark tells us about his fascinating journey in the theater, so I'll leave you to that. But before we go, Greg, we got to get a little bit easy here, buddy. We got to go to KeystoneTech.com. That's KeystoneTech.com.
Now, really, they have an LED tube for just about every application, but you know what? I ran into one where they didn't the other day, or nobody does. A 5-foot T5. This is in a cove light. So what did I do? I had to look for options. They have their Illumagroove. Their Illumagroove is an LED module that has built in, it's almost like a tube, but it's like the strip of the LED that comes with the driver, and it comes in a variety of lengths, 11-inch, 22-inch, 33-inch, 44-inch. So those oddball lengths where a linear lamp might not fit, they've got this Illumagroove module, high temperature rating, higher than a tube, which is awesome, and a Keystone driver that comes with it. So check those guys out.
How come you didn't tell me about this before?
I found out yesterday. I didn't talk to you yet.
Oh man, this guy had like 40 freezers, and he was like calling me, I need this tube or an
Yeah.
LED. And I'm like, well, you can buy the fluorescent for $95 a bulb, and I can import them from some weird guy in the US for you. But now you could have gone LED with the Illumagroove. Go to KeystoneTech.com. That's KeystoneTech.com. And of course, the leader in lighting digital media, the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors. That's NAILD.org. And of course, join us. But for right now, listen to Mark and Henrik. I got to get it right. It's Henrik. Henrik and Mark on the Get a Grip on Lighting Conversation series.
I would like to welcome you to this little podcast, Mark. It's been a long time. We've known each other, and when I put you on my wish list for people to talk to, I reflected over our first meeting back in 2005, where I got the opportunity to start Fagerholt Lighting Academy, and I would really like to succeed with that. And I asked a few friends, people I respect in the industry, and you were one of them who invited me into your office in London 17 years ago. And you gave me some guidelines and said, I think you should do that, go in that direction. And I'm still there. I'm still running the academy. So your advice was well received and much appreciated. Now, you probably also know that I'm teaching at the university in Copenhagen, and a lot of my students keep asking, what does it take to become a really good lighting designer? And that's what I would like to open, because in my perspective, you are one of the best lighting designers I know. But how did you get there? What does it take?
For me, my journey in light was almost accidental, and I think that's quite common. I was studying engineering at university, and not really enjoying the pure science side of it without any recourse to artistry. And then somebody asked me to do a follow spot in a small studio production at university, and said, "What's a follow spot?" But yeah, sure. And that was a Peter Maxwell opera, and I just fell in love immediately, not only with theatre and performing arts, but also just the way in which light. And when doing a follow spot, you have this visceral and immediate physical connection between the performer and you. And if you get it wrong, the audience can't see them. But if you get it right, then you're helping that process of connection between viewer and object. And that really started then of a fascination. My mind kind of exploded with the potentials of this, and I started experimenting in our student theatre, and it was a really a small, very hands-on, easy to manipulate, and I started kind of working out from first principles what I thought light could do, and then I started reading.
So there was no theory in the beginning. You were just jumping into it. You
No.
didn't.
For me, it was really, really hands-on. No theory. In fact, some of the theory I kind of didn't invent. It was already there, but I was working it out for myself. Really, really thinking about what light was, what it could do, what it, both physically but also emotionally.
Did you share that with the director, or was it just you feel? Did you feel this feels good, and
Well,
then you carried on, or?
no, that's a really interesting question because in theatre, particularly back then, visualization wasn't something that you did. When you were communicating about ideas and about your intent, it was all with language. And so it started developing a vocabulary of light, which wasn't only about intensity, direction, and all of those kind of light words. Actually, it was about a connection and a cultural hinterland. So it was talking about films that we both liked, or paintings, or natural inspirations within the natural world. So yeah, very much it became about what was in your mind's eye, a cultural reference point, and a vocabulary to communicate those ideas to directors and designers.
But did you then choose afterwards to go to the academic world, or did you stay in stage lighting and move from stage lighting
into architectural lighting? Yeah. Yeah, it's a standing joke in my department. I'm the worst and qualified person in the whole group. I'm surrounded by people that have got masters and such like, and yeah, I've just got an engineering qualification.
But Mark, if you look around the world, let's say on a global plane, how many lighting designers do you think have that background today? Because it's so often that we talk about this.
It was very common. And I think that's particularly coming out of the 80s and 90s, when architectural lighting really started kind of being a thing that really gained traction. I know there were practitioners before that, but it really started gaining momentum in that. And a lot of those practitioners came out of theatre, because that had a naturally, and I know that clients were looking to lighting designers to provide a theatricality. So theatre emigres were kind of a natural place to find them.
When I left university as an engineer, I went to take some lessons at the School of Architecture because there was some conflict in language. I didn't know how I could do the lighting for the architects that wanted to create a certain space. So I attended that, and I also found out that what we are doing is extremely static compared to what you're doing, which is very dynamic and fluent in that. How did you manage to connect that, for the fluent experience, to the static lighting that we very often do in industrial or office lighting?
To be honest, it's one of the things I really miss in architecture lighting, is that kind of fluidity. And particularly I miss music, opera and contemporary dance, and where you would actually be creating light scenes that might change, every second. And it was really, really dynamic, as you suggest. And sure, I miss that, but architectural lighting has given me something more than, or something different from performative lighting, and that's something to do with its democratic access. It's available to a much wider group of people, and the impact is different. The satisfactions are different.
I need just to say, because very often I think that when I speak to people with stage lighting, you have a fixed, you know where you have your audience. It's like doing on a very narrow angle, looking at your audience is looking at your stage, and you know where you have them, where you have your. But in architectural lighting, in landscape lighting, in city lighting, you have to be sure people can pick any spot and look at your creation, or facade lighting, or whatever. Do you think that, does that create a different thought pattern for you?
Technically, yes, absolutely, for sure, because it's actually, there's a whole series of angles and directions that are denied to you as an architectural lighting designer. But one of the joys of architectural lighting is that you not only have to view it from everywhere, but you are actually inhabiting it more than if you are a viewer in the stage. So there's opportunities as well as conflicts. So technically, without doubt, yes, it made me think about lighting differently, but in some ways, no, because actually, it's still that process of rendering human within a physical environment to evoke an effect or an emotion or to facilitate a task.
So you start with the human, no matter where you are, either stage or industrial or domestic or.
Yeah, and it that is absolutely fundamental to my practice, and that's what BDP lighting is about. If it was about one thing, it was about that. You start with the human.
So human-centric lighting is not just a buzzword for you; it actually means something.
No, we kind of yeah.
It sounds like that.
Yeah.
You know, when I stalked you a little bit on the web here, you have both gotten a lecture and a sustainability award. And some of my students say, but how do you get an award? What does it make that you got the awards that you have had under your professional time, do you think?
The forget about the awards, they'll come. What's important is enthusiasm, belief, and passion. So,
nice.
For
well
instance,
put.
if your first question was, how do you become a good lighting designer, and I told you a story about how I discovered light and my passionate response to it. To do the sustainability award, that was because I was feeling it was something that had interested me for a long time, embedded carbon in lighting, but it wasn't getting traction. Nobody was particularly interested in it. And then in 2019, 4 manufacturers sent me Christmas cards telling me what they were doing off their own bat to do with circular economy. And I thought, this next year, I have to do something about this. So I actually instituted a research project for our own purposes, where I thought that would just inform the way BDP chose to specify luminaires. But actually, what transpired is it had much wider resonance and impact, and it's because of that. And then you talk about what you've been doing and what you're learning, and if it's of interest, it gains momentum, it gains attention, and then that's when the awards come.
That's cool. I'll remember that. Could we go to circular lighting, because I've looked at your model and I've seen your presentations and I think it's really cool. What was the biggest challenges when you made that circular model?
It came out of a conversation with a colleague of mine called Tom Niven, who's my associate in the London office, and we were just talking about the subject, and then we had pens in, and we were trying to work some things out, and we just started doodling, and this thing came out, and it was about the fundamental realization was that the circular economy has to be about projects, not product. And
but you had that before your research project. That was, you started doodling, and then you started, okay, that's the flow I'm sort of looking for, how you did that.
Yeah. So you start with a hypothesis and then you test it, and then you test it and test it, and then you talk to other people, and if it stands up, it stands up. So that was kind of the process.
How long
talking
time?
Again, you see.
Yeah. How long time did it take you to develop it until the level that it is today, where it looks very well thought through?
About 2 years, but the initial diagram one afternoon. We then were very lucky to actually have a project where we had, unfortunately, it didn't get built, but a project with a really a client with a very clear brief around circular economy, and allowed us to test our ideas. And then kind of we shared it with the studio. The first the first year was in the first year, the year was split into 4. The first quarter was about trying to scope it. Second quarter and third quarter was about developing the model, and then the fourth quarter was about going to clients and stakeholders and actually testing it with a view to actually creating something at the end. Since then, it's actually just been about refining that model, and our Marcoms, the latest one, was something that the wider BDP animal was interested in, and then crafted that into the thing that's actually out there now. But,
could you just take our guests through the stages, sort of, if you can do that by heart?
Yes. Okay, it starts with the client, starts with the brief, then goes through design, through construction, operation, and then learning out of how you operate your own building reinforms a brief for a client to start the brief for the next project. Hence the circle, the project cycle circle. And a lot of the debate is about obviously the design, because I'm a designer. That's what I can have some help in. But the dialogue is that there are within that circle, broadly speaking, 4 classes of people: clients, designers, constructors, and operators. And where it gets challenging but interesting is it's the communications and collaborations between those 4 parties that is necessary to make sure that no links in that circular chain get broken.
What is your responsibility to do that? Do you need to facilitate the process, or does it flow, or what do you think about the obstacles or the opportunities?
The first thing, the first responsibility is to talk to our clients, and then to make it an option that they may or may not consider. If they get it, enthusiastic about it, really wish to drive it forward, then our responsibility and contribution is as designers, and then the research paper sets out the various different ways in which, as a lighting designer, you can make an impact. And I think, but the other kind of responsibility, I think, is about knitting together those various stakeholders, which is kind of why I was co-founded the Green Light Alliance, which is essentially a network organization to get people that not necessarily always talk to each other to get involved, to explore the issues, and try and actually drive some change through. So that's the third question you asked me, where the answer is talking.
Well, I guess that's what we're doing, and it's great. I would just, you said very clearly you are a designer, and I'm representing a manufacturer, and we really like these things when we log a spec and we say now we agree upon what we want to produce. We can produce it at this cost to this delivery time, and then sort of log it. I've always thought that was intriguing and fascinating to do it, and afterwards still have the flexibility to change minor things in a spec. But sometimes, it's a completely new spec. So how would that work in this model? It must be really crucial that you keep the spec.
Yes, and that is actually at the moment, because there's no really robust circular economy benchmarks outside of TM66, which is obviously new. Then it's going to be difficult to hold a spec on equal and approved if you want those kind of circular credentials, which is again one of the reasons why their client buy-in, their establishment of the brief. If this is important, then there are certain things that flow from it, and one of them is what you do with specs, and whether or not you want to go into value engineering, or whether or not you're actually going to charge your designer to come up with the best value.
It's really
not only in terms of capital, but in terms of on cost and in terms of sustainability.
this value engineering term is, I don't know if it's used globally, but it's really a nasty thing, because the only thing that comes out of that is monetary value. There's no design value, no content for people in it. So I think it's such a bad word that we have invented there,
Yeah,
talking about value engineering.
it's normally another word for cost cutting, and then
Yeah.
it's not great. But I suppose I've been fairly lucky with my clients, is that if you can actually establish with them the impact on your original design, your original concept, as to what the implications of certain decisions will be, then it can be a value conversation. And we have, in certain instances, stripped a lot of money out of projects while still delivering the essential core brief. So it's not impossible, but it's a more sophisticated conversation for sure.
But that implies that the designer is still on board, because whenever I envision a value, the designer is gone. He's made his brief, and then he's off the grid, and then it's just about doing evil equally unapproved, as you say. And that's the problem, because there's nobody fighting for the good light.
Yeah, no, absolutely right. And I mean, though, where those sophisticated conversations happen, it's where the client wants you still on the project all the way through.
But yeah, I get that. But to me, it seems that different places in the world, it's different chains or different, not chains, what's it called, connectors in the value chain. In Sweden, it's very typically electrical engineers. In Denmark, we have very powerful architects. In England, it's lighting designers. In German, it's like some wholesalers. So it's very. Do you see a picture how the world looks in this way, that in some countries it's one chain, one link in the chain that makes all the decisions, and in other countries it's other chains? And how do you adapt your model to that?
Yeah, it's
if you
hard.
see it that way.
I do. Yeah, no. Each country has different cultures as to how they do it, yeah. I suppose I'm fortunate. Most of our work tends to be in the UK, not exclusively so by any means. But then, if we are being asked to join internationally, then it's normally our opinion is valued, and quite frequently we are all the way through. So I just guess I'm lucky. But you're right that the different countries have different cultures, and sometimes that works better for the end result than others, for sure.
It's at least different, that's for sure. But what I've found was in common in my experience is that when the owner, the guy who's sitting on the wallet, is at the table, the focus goes more in the design, more in the human-centric lighting direction than cost savings. But it's rare.
Yeah, no, I mean,
that
I think
the real
that's
owner
true.
is there.
I think you've actually struck on something really, really powerful there. It's just, if there is a single intelligence driving the project, someone who cares, somebody who's got emotional skin in the game, and you will be there together, that client person, that designer person, at the opening, then the relationship is entirely different, and it becomes one of trust and respect, rather than a committee whose members will oscillate, who will have disparate terms of reference and targets, and cost will be way up there, and that's more difficult. That's absolutely the case. Yeah, for sure.
Now, I would like to change the subject a little bit, because I think it's super interesting with 3D printing of fixtures. If I just keep that headline, what are your initial comments to 3D printable fixtures?
It's always really excited me. I can remember I had a conversation with Bob Bohannon about this, God knows how many years ago, a long time ago, and he was getting really, really enthusiastic about it, and you're saying this is going to be the future, this is going to be the future, I the appeals are that if you can take, well, there's massive opportunities, all sorts of different ways. So I'm sorry, I'm going to shut me up if I start burbling on. But
No, carry
local
on, please.
manufacture obviously has real appeal. Its contribution to design for manufacture and assembly, it has massive appeal. In terms of the way in which design for product gets disseminated, so it is really exciting, but also quite a challenge as to how you protect copyright and all those kind of really important questions. And I think that I'm slightly concerned about the potential toxicity of some of the processes. I don't know enough about the detail of the process to understand actually whether or not it's good or not. But additive manufacture as opposed to subtractive manufacture, on the face of it, would appear to be a more efficient, less wasteful of resources process.
But when we think about sustainability, and a lot of people say we want to source our products nearby, and we build like 2 40-foot containers and put them on the parking lot, and then we actually produce the fixtures just at the doorstep. What do you think about that argument?
I think that's really exciting. It probably, yeah, I mean, they're really exciting. Those 40-foot Arctics will probably not be on site. They will probably be in the off-site manufacturing plant that buildings are now getting made in, and then brought to site and kind of assembled on site. So yeah, I think it's the way it's going to go. But you can think of the speed of innovation. I mean, you were just saying about iterative specification and improvements on products. If you're not committed to really expensive and inflexible tooling paradigms back in some centralized factory, but you can actually update. It's almost like you can update the software or the patterns or the models, or and oh, you want a slightly different blue one today? Yes, fine, that's it. Hit send, done. Or do you know what I mean? I think it sounds it's wildly exciting.
But is there anything that rings a bell as on a sustainable perspective, this is really bad about 3D printing, for instance? Or is there anything where you say, now you've just said the positive thing?
It's about the details of toxicity and whether or not it is actually more energy efficient. And I would want to be continually convinced about that before I fully endorsed it. But given the fact that it's not 100% mature, by kind of really, it's not even close to being 100% mature yet. I think I've got, my mind is very alive to the potential and the excitement of it.
But how would your dream scenario look for designer who, for a manufacturing side? Your dream scenario for looked through the sustainability glasses. When you write in your paper that you want to source nearby, it also limits your choice of suppliers, I guess. And I would really like to go into that. What do you think about that? Because now we say, oh, we have the entire world, we can buy fixtures everywhere. And what you do is like, you now say, no, I want to source it nearby. And what does nearby mean to you?
Yes, it does, but it just becomes another design factor. So it's not that you would only source local equipment to the detriment of every other design criteria that applies. But if there are two products and one's manufactured in a country or in continent as opposed to X continent or X country, then that's in its favor. So I think where we will come to is, particularly when you start doing the kind of evaluations that you do, which TM66 are now beginning to introduce, or even whole life carbon costing, the equations will flex so that an extremely efficient luminaire that's sourced further away may actually be the more sustainable solution than a local one that has been that is not as efficient, say.
But I guess we're still pretty far away from that, because when I look at our life cycle cost, it's still more than 60% of the total carbon footprint is still generated during lifetime.
Yeah.
So we would love to work more with controls that actually switches off or dims the light, because just our freight and transport costs and raw material is very
typically
low compared
1%
to,
or less.
yeah, exactly.
No, that's yeah. But and that's why actually carbon. I don't think embedded carbon is a main driver for the circular economy in lighting. I think it's much more to do with resource scarcity and toxicity and pollution. That's what makes it an imperative. It's not actually carbon. And the other thing that you were saying about all of the carbon within 99% is in use.
Yeah.
That's true until you decarbonize the grid. At which
Yes.
point, none of the carbon involved in
our biggest.
That's 20 years away.
Just need to know how you handle the carbon mix or the energy mix, really, because in some countries we have still coal and oil burning, and otherwise it's hydro plant, solar, wind. So it's very depending. Do you take that into consideration when you plan for where the building is, the energy mix?
We will do, yeah. No, sure. Yeah, certainly.
Because we see a lot of different weather. Please.
The carbon calculations are, we're only beginning to do them. I mean, there may be other practices that are more advanced than us in that respect, but we're only on the beginning of that journey. But where the electricity comes from, certainly in terms of in use, is very location dependent, because it's very dependent on the carbon of the electricity supply.
Yeah, I get it, and it is still a big thing. Now, having talked about all about the things we've talked about now, where do you see the biggest bottleneck in making circular economy work in lighting?
The biggest
bottleneck, or the biggest problem in getting the circle spinning?
I think operation. I think it's going to be difficult, but I can see clients already getting really enthusiastic about this in terms of brief. They just want to know how they can do it. I think the design communities on it. Manufacturers, I think, are actually leading the way, which is great, because normally, no, that's not fair. I think sometimes manufacturers are characterized as that they have to be carried kicking and screaming into the new world, and that's absolutely not the case in this one. I think they're leading the field and really, really proactive. And I can even see, if you've got the client and the design team on board, actually making sure the contractors are there as well, because and the conversations I've had, certainly with some of the better contractors, the bigger ones, they know it, they get it, they see the problems and the challenges, but I don't think there's much resistance. I think the real problem is in operation, because you can specify a sustainable product, and you can even get it installed in your building, but if it's just then chucked in the bin when at end of life, the whole thing falls down. And it's about how you get product reused, recycled, repurposed or recycled at last recourse, and just never ever landfill it. That's really hard.
when I've looked at what you've been doing recently with track systems and you snap fixtures into it, it's easy to move. I love that idea, but you don't talk about fashion or trendy products or anything. It looks like you think that some of the products can last for 30 years, which they can, but will we still have round fixtures with oval shades in 30 years? What about that part?
So I did talk about aesthetics a bit because we have, or historically, I've tried to hide my light fittings as much as possible by embedding them
I know.
into
Yep.
into architecture. And actually, if you're going to disaggregate lighting from the fabric of the building, then it starts becoming much more apparent. And therefore you need to have that aesthetic debate both with your design partners but also your client. So aesthetics is an important part of this debate. Your point is, what about changing aesthetics? Well, I think
Yeah.
swapping out one fixture for another is fine as long as you don't put it in the bin. If you can take that fixture and reuse it somewhere else or repurpose it, then that becomes, something. But also, I wonder whether or not will fashion really drive it that hard. I think
That's exactly what I'm getting at, because I don't know it myself. I don't really have a feel for that.
I don't think operators that are happy and familiar with their building will just go, you know what, I don't like light fittings that shape anymore. I'm going to rip them all out and replace them. I think they will do.
But
I've got a
if
different
you
use for this building now. I now need it to do something different. And that might be brand, or it might be function, or it might be some other driver. And at that point, then the demands upon the lighting changes, and absolutely, then fashion may produce a different solution that is then brought on board.
But if you think about shop lighting, because we've had some customers in various countries that actually would like a little bit less quality lighting because it's only going to be used for 3 years, then we'll dump it anyway. So we don't want a good heat sink. We don't need a high class reflector. We just need something, because it's in fashion and in shop lighting, we will replace it anyway. What do you think about these, for instance, from office buildings, schools, universities versus shopping malls and retail?
I think retail is a, is a bit of a challenging sector. It always has been. But if the paradigm is we want the cheapest possible way of getting far too much light so that I can throw it away in 2 years' time, no, that's not sustainable.
No.
But then there are other retailers out there that don't. That's not the way they operate, and
No.
sustainability is becoming very much more part of the public discourse. It will the green credentials of brands, including retailers, is becoming more important, so I don't think that kind of ultra wasteful
No.
model will gain favour in the future. Obviously, some
No,
it will, and some will be
if we have
faster to the
these.
table than others. But
No, but when we talk about conscious customers, I think it's customer driven. I don't want to shop in a shop that treats their inventory like that or something. That's probably a powerful driver as well.
yeah, I think
When we
so.
think about wholesalers or or people who are selling fixtures over the counter, when do you think sustainability really will hit that part of our lighting industry? When we have big in the US, big in Germany, where it's more like the wholesaler style or the lighting supplier.
Yeah, it's hard, isn't it? I think part of the problem is LEDs. That it used to be that when you think about it, you used to have a downlight and you used to put a lamp in it. Most people called them bulbs, but let's stay professional and call them lamps.
Yeah.
The industry could drive efficiency and did drive efficiency in those light sources and yet they were still sold as commodities. The problem with LEDs is they promised and delivered much higher levels of efficiency, but in a really sophisticated and technically difficult way.
Mm-hmm.
So now you're talking about, it's much more difficult to commoditize efficiently and sustainably, and I think it's going to take a while for the industry to get its head around that. But for instance,
But
okay, if you just let's, as an example, take a downlight. If you have a magnificently fused chip on board, fused to a heatsink, brilliantly efficient, but it has to be a sealed unit, relative to, say, a GU10 or a lamp that you can replace, or then suddenly you've got something that's a lot more easily understandable by the consumer, and also sold by the sales agent, be that wholesaler or retailer. So I think we've got to work this through, and I think there will be professional products that can stay sophisticated and difficult, because there's an industry that's tooled up to understand the advantages. But when you get to retail, then and wholesale in that market, and to an extent, I feel that also includes non-specified product. So
yeah,
what I mean
exactly.
by where you get an electrical contractor comes into a wholesaler and say, I want 15 of 600 mil lights, please.
Yep.
That needs to work through better to become sustainably commoditized.
Do you think that a wholesaler or a lighting distributor who really say look into circular lighting or serious sustainability would have a competitive advantage over his colleagues in the industry?
Yeah, you've hit on a really important point, haven't you? Is there's no money in it, why would you do it? And the answer to that is either brand or regulation. There's only two. You're either going to push someone or you're going to pull someone. But if there's a significant competitive disadvantage, then that's going to be a problem. I haven't got an answer to that one, sorry.
Now that's nice to hear that you can answer everything, and you still have won an award even though you can't answer everything. No, but it's super cool, because I've thought a lot about it, and I just needed to share it with you. But now we have talked for 40 minutes, and I have a round-up question, because I'm so curious. What is the next big thing for you? What are you looking forward to for the next 5 years?
There's lots of things, but nothing kind of burning. Oh yes, it's this one. It's carrying on my trying to design great environments for people, and I see all sorts of opportunities. There's data is one, modeling, the coalition of visualization, calculation, communication, design for manufacture and assembly. We've only just started the circular economy thing, so we've got a long way to go on that one. And I suppose, yeah, I mean,
but you're a bit all over the place right now, isn't it?
I am a bit, but fundamentally, it's about people and trying not to and addressing the climate crisis.
These two things, but they are driving in the opposite direction, I think. When I look at it, you can either have fixtures with a very low carbon footprint and very high energy efficiency and crappy lighting, or you can have really good color rendering, excellent spectral distributions, all that stuff, and have really high light quality, but it comes as a price. So my dilemma is often, do you want to save the world, or do you want to make nice surroundings for dementia people in hospitals or whatever, so that they can get benefit and get a worthy life for good lighting for life? What do you think about that dilemma? Or
Well, that's the designer's dilemma, isn't it? It's trying to square the circle, or the sustainability has always been about triple bottom line, and that's about something that's financially feasible, environmentally responsible, and in terms of its function. It provides that function, because if you don't provide the function, there's no point it being cheap or utterly sustainable. I mean, for instance, the cheapest and most sustainable way of lighting a building is not to put any light in and just use it
That's
during the
right.
day.
Yeah.
So, there always has been that dilemma. I think designers can bring solutions where you minimize the amount of stuff and
So it's about a
used
fine.
by.
You're trying to find a
See?
delicate balance somewhere in the middle, or
Yeah,
or are
yeah,
you?
yeah. No,
Because
just that.
okay, cool. So having maybe that was a bit clumsy closing on my side, but it's really good to talk to you, and we could babble on forever. I think it's so inspiring to hear what you think about all these things. So I'll hope that we'll meet once this Corona situation is over again, and we can
It'd be
have a
nice to
chat
do
in
it
a bar
face to
somewhere.
face, wouldn't it?
It really
Yes.
would. It really would. So
The first drink's
but
on me.
that's a good one. I'll take that. But I'll thank you very, very much for participating here today, and hope you will take care and stay healthy, and we'll see each other soon again.
Yeah, real
Thank you
pleasure.
very much,
Thank
Mark.
you.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Keystone Technologies with the Illuma Groove coming in hot. Go to KEYSTONETECH.com, Greg. Well, you went there, and then I just learned doing the damn ad about this amazing product.
That's right. The Illuma Groove 11-inch 22, 33, 44. So oddball lengths, but they're also connectable end to end so that you can make it whatever length you want with those dimensions. 27K, 3K, 4K, 5K also. That was my other oddball part. It was a 3K
Color.
5-foot T5. Yuck. But I found it.
Oh yeah. You gotta go to KeystoneTech.com right away. Keeping it easy for you. That's right. If you're a lighting distributor, you gotta get in with Keystone. Come on now. And of course, the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors. Go to neild.org. And we got nothing but love and thanks for Henrik Clausen and Mark Ridler for producing this show for us. Really enjoyed it, guys. Looking forward to more from Henrik. Once a month, probably. Bye for now.